Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham Sarvasya Chaham Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham Sarvasya Chaham Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. Anybody like to chant? Sarvasya Chaham Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. Anyone else? Sarvasya Chaham Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. Chaham Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. Any other brave souls? Sarvasya Chaham Hridisani Vishto Mata Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha Vedaischa Savairam Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. Sarvasya, of all living beings. Cha, and. Aham, I. Vidhi, in the heart. Sanivishta, situated. Mata, from me. Smriti, remembrance. Jnanam, knowledge. Apohanam, forgetfulness. Cha, and. Vedai, by the Vedas. Cha, also. Sarvai, all. Aham, I am. Eva, certainly. Vedya, knowable. Vedanta Krit, the compiler of the Vedanta. Vedavit, the knower of the Vedas. Eva, certainly. Cha, and. Aham, I. Translation. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Can you repeat, please? I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart, and it is from Him that all activities are initiated. The living entity forgets everything of his past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is witness to all his work. Therefore, he begins his work according to his past deeds. Required knowledge is supplied to him, and remembrance is given to him, and he forgets also about his past life. Thus, the Lord is not only all-pervading, He is also localized in every individual heart. He awards the different fruit of results. He is worshipable not only as the impersonal Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the localized Paramatma, but as the form of the incarnation of the Vedas as well. The Vedas give the right direction to people so they can properly mold their lives and come back to Godhead, back to home. The Vedas offer knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and Krishna in his incarnation as Vyasadeva is the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. The commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva in the Srimad Bhagavatam gives the real understanding of Vedanta Sutra. The Supreme Lord is so full that for the deliverance of the conditioned soul, He is a supplier and digester of foodstuff, the witness of His activity, and the giver of knowledge in the form of the Vedas, and as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. He is worshipable by the conditioned soul. Thus God is all good. God is all merciful. Anta pravishta shashta jananam. The living entity forgets as soon as he quits his present body, but he begins his work again, initiated by the Supreme Lord. Although he forgets, the Lord gives him the intelligence to renew his work where he ended his last life. So not only does the living entity enjoy or suffer in this world, according to the dictation from the Supreme Lord situated locally in the heart, but he receives the opportunity to understand the Vedas from him. If one is serious about understanding the Vedic knowledge, then Krishna gives the required intelligence. Why does he present the Vedic knowledge for understanding? Because the living entity individually needs to understand Krishna. Vedic literature confirms this. Yo sao sarvair vedair giyate. In all Vedic literature, beginning from the four Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, and the Upanishads and Puranas, the glories of the Supreme Lord are celebrated. By performance of Vedic rituals, discussion of the Vedic philosophy, and worship of the Lord in devotional service, he is attained. Therefore, the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. The Vedas give us direction by which to understand Krishna and the process of realizing Him. The ultimate goal is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedanta Sutra 1.1.4 confirms this in the following words. Tattu saman vayat. One can attain perfection in 3 stages. By understanding Vedic literature, one can understand his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By performing the different processes, one can approach Him. And at the end, one can attain the supreme goal, which is who is no other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, the purpose of the Vedas, the understanding of the Vedas, and the goal of the Vedas are clearly defined. Om Ajnana Timanandasya Dhananjana Salakaya Chakshurum Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Chi Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Shvapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam, Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha, Shri Rupam Sagajatam, Sagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam, Sadvaitam Savarutam, Purijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Shri Radha Krishna Padan, Sagana Lalita, Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshware, Vishabhanu Sute Devi, Namami Hari Priye, Panchakapatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advait Gadadhar, Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sarvasya Chaham Ridisani Vishto, Matasmritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha, Vedaischa Savairahameva Vedyo, Vedanta Krit Veda Videva Chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. This is obviously one of the most important verses in the Bhagavad Gita. And we've gained insight over the last, I think, 2 classes before this, when the verse has already been recited and explained, also in a very, very wonderful way by Damodar Dhira Goswami. Yesterday I heard his class on the internet. Wonderful, wonderful class. We are under the conception as conditioned souls in the material conception of life that we are the doer of activities. Kartaham iti manyate, which are actually carried out by nature, material nature, according to the Bhagavad Gita. This is a great mystery to the conditioned soul, because we are addicted to trying to understand things by our ascending knowledge. We're conditioned to try to understand things through our limited, very, very limited mind and senses. And the illusion is so complete that until one actually comes to the process of Krishna consciousness and understands how Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Krishna is everything, one is certainly bewildered. And as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur very lucidly explains, that by this process of gaining material knowledge, this false ego we're covered by, which is this most subtle material element, and which is so difficult to overcome, has completely convinced us that we are a product of matter, and that material acquisitions are ours. In the beginning of this chapter, it was nicely explained by the Lord himself, how this material world is like a banyan tree, which is situated with the roots up, the branches down. How this material world is situated on desire. And it was explained also how it's literally impossible, the intricacies of how this material world is developed is because it's expanded from the Supreme Lord himself. It is so extremely difficult to understand that unless one has a bona fide spiritual master following in one of the bona fide disciplic successions, it's actually impossible to understand. Just as Lord Brahma explains in the prayers, his prayers to Krishna, one of his set of prayers, how just like when a seed sprouts, for example, a banyan tree, and the banyan tree comes out and it's incredibly complex with all its different branches. I mean, there's banyan trees that go on for, hundreds and hundreds of feet. And it's so intricate, all the branches and all the, its root system and everything. And the seed of the banyan tree itself that sprouted that banyan tree, as soon as a banyan tree sprouts, that seed becomes invisible. You can trace out the banyan tree, its source, all you want, but you won't be able to find the seed from which it came. Similarly, this material world is so intricate, so detailed, and yet when one tries to source out the cause, it's literally impossible to find it. It's very rare to come to the point, being an eternally conditioned soul like we are, to come to the point to be able to have the opportunity. Of course, the opportunity in one sense is open to everyone. Krishna says himself, Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dvesho stinapriyaha. I'm equal to everyone. I'm not envious of anyone. But he says, as they surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. So, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, it's out of thousands and thousands of persons, one may even be interested to inquire, to try to understand, who am I? What is this world about? Because our senses are so strong. And first of all, we're completely addicted to our subtle sense, which is the mind. Not only are we addicted to the mind, but in the conditioned world, we're convinced that we're at least our mind. We're actually convinced we're our senses also, because as the senses dictate to us, then we immediately follow. But especially the mind, even the philosophers who may go through the process of neti, of trying to understand what this world is and who I am, by this process of trying to understand what this world isn't and what I'm not. This process not only takes a very long time to do, literally thousands and thousands of births, probably, but as the end result, this is the detriment of gaining material knowledge. Even if it's knowledge of matter and spirit, unless one understands actually there is a controller of matter and spirit, and that controller is a person, our false ego tries to claim the position of God and saying, well, if I'm not the supreme God, at least I am the same as God, without really understanding what the distinction is. And one can go on for many, many thousands of lifetimes through that process before one actually gets blessed with knowledge of the absolute truth. So when we actually come, somehow or other, to the process of pure devotional service, we can understand this verse is very indicative of the extreme good fortune that we have. Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavamam prabhadyate Vasudeve sarvamiti samahama sudurlabha. Finally, when one comes to the point to understand and accept that Vasudeva is everything, it takes long, long time. But then the spiritual life becomes very easy. It becomes very easy upon our acceptance of the supreme authority, of our acceptance of the process of descending knowledge, and of the process of agreeing to be controlled by the Supreme Controller. Because actually, we're already controlled by the Supreme Controller. Whether it's our conditioned state of existence or our liberated state of existence, every single aspect of our existence is controlled by the Lord, which is very explicitly explained in this verse. In the verses leading up to this verse, the Lord talks about the process of surrender. And he talks about how only those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, can attain to that supreme kingdom. He states also actually, Srila Prabhupada states in the purport of this verse that the first qualification of the surrendering process is that one not be deluded by pride. And Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain that because we are thinking ourselves a product of matter, and therefore that material acquisitions are ours, this pride is keeping us back from our acceptance and our surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this knowledge that Krishna is giving in Bhagavad Gita is really, really important. And he states in the 7th chapter that he really wants us to understand this knowledge, that it's really important. He says that of the 4 types of persons who approach him in devotional service, because no one approaches Krishna unless, from the position of pure devotion, unless he's a pure devotee. We all have some different motivation. There's some sincerity there. And there's also some material motivation. And the process of devotional service is weeding out those different contaminations, such as desire for wealth, such as wanting something in return for devotional service, and getting to the point of anya bilasita sunyam jnana karma janavita anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama, coming to the platform of the topmost platform of devotional service, uttama bhakti, which is entirely possible through the process of Bhakti Yoga, since this process itself is actually non-different from Krishna. And as we surrender to Krishna, Krishna takes charge of us. But the more one is deluded by false pride and still thinks that I am this material body, and my relatives in relation with this body are mine, and I have some purpose, material purpose, to fulfill in life, then it will be very difficult for us to achieve the mercy of Krishna and to be able to surrender. And so anyway, this knowledge is very important, and Krishna gives us some very keen insight in this verse, how he's seated within all of our hearts, and our remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness is coming from him. So of course we don't specifically, we can't remember our previous life, but Krishna is giving some indication of what to do in this life, our proclivities, our tendencies toward certain activities. We get a certain particular type of body. We become born in a particular family, all due to our past deeds, or shall we say past misdeeds. And we have this sense of remembrance, although we don't specifically remember our past life. So we're continuing in our path that's coming from many lifetimes. And Krishna is reminding us of what we wanted to achieve in our past lifetimes. And he also makes us forget things, especially that aren't in line with what our desire is. So the desire is explained as the only actual thing that we're actually able to do within this body. And so our desires are really important in Krishna consciousness as we associate with the Supreme Lord, especially through chanting His holy name and through our active service. We are able to act out our proclivities and engage them in Krishna's service. And through our intelligence, which Krishna states here He is giving us, we are able to find out how to come closer and closer to molding our desires in such a way that our desires become one with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains that this is the oneness that devotees experience. It's not a oneness of merging into the Supreme Brahman, but it's a merging of desire, from our desire to the desire of Krishna. And to the extent that we are able to merge our desire within the desire of Krishna and start understanding the desire of Krishna, then automatically our conditioning and all the extreme, stringent modes, the reaction from the modes that are covering our consciousness and keeping us bound into the material miseries, begin to subside. And gradually, step by step, we start becoming detached from our material body, from our material mind. And this is affected most rapidly by the sincere chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Because by this process of chanting Hare Krishna, which is the Yuga Dharma, Krishna himself becomes present. And it's said that this chanting, if it's done in a way that's uninterrupted and unmotivated, then automatically we will become free from the material miseries. So the process is very, very, extremely simple. But the problem is our desires generally are very, very complex. And we feel ourselves, for the most part, entrapped within these desires. So now that we've been given the process of pure devotional service, and we've been given this very advanced understanding of who God is, how He is controlling everything, giving us everything we have, we should dedicate ourselves and apply ourselves more and more sincerely to the process. And this will ease our suffering. It will answer all our doubts. I remember when I joined the movement and I was a new devotee, and I was actually, before I started coming to the temple every day, and I started asking questions day in and day out, and I'd come back every day, and this went on for about a month. And after about a month, all my questions were answered, and I realized that I thought that this is it. You know, I still had very strong material attachments, but I realized that there's no more. I don't have any more doubts. You know, Krishna must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This process is going to allow me to reestablish my lost relationship with Krishna. And if I'm actually sincere, then I have to surrender. There is no other option. And then when I joined the temple, I tried to apply myself as enthusiastically as I could. And although I didn't have a lot of intelligence and a lot of strong attachment for studying Prabhupada's books, I was very enthusiastic for service. And then, of course, we started I joined in 1972 in San Francisco, and we started the books then. Prabhupada was translating, so they started coming. First there was Bhagavad Gita, Isopanishad. We had the first few volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then other books started coming. Devotees started going out and distributing the books. And I showed a propensity for that, so I was immediately engaged in that. And I remember the process of engaging in devotional service was so powerful, and the satisfaction I got from it was so complete that all my questions were answered. And of course, you know, we'd come back and we'd have Bhagavad Gita class, we'd drink hot milk and read Krishna book. And, you know, Srila Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita that faith is created by the association of devotees. And that faith is most important thing in Krishna consciousness, because the understanding that we need to develop to get beyond the shackles of this false ego, which has us convinced we are this material body, and our relatives are all, you know, we have some, you know, relation with different than people outside of, like, our family, like that. This process is so incredibly powerful, and I realized this as a new devotee, and found that all my doubts were, you know, not only theoretically realized, but more and more practically realized. And as I went on in Krishna consciousness, I mean, it was very powerful also because Srila Prabhupada was personally on the planet, and the level of cooperation among all our God brothers and God sisters was very high because, you know, we had the pure devotee personally on the planet, and you know, the process Prabhupada had given us, and the whole system of management, the system also of respecting our older God brothers and God sisters, even though they might just be a few months in the movement, really helped us to engage fully in Krishna's service and start experiencing Krishna's association within the process of devotional service every step of the way. So I was kind of remembering that, so I just kind of wanted to share that. Srila Prabhupada states in the purport in the first sentence that all the activities that we engage in are actually initiated from Paramatma within our heart. So that's very interesting to understand that. And that's, you know, of course it's said that whether one has material desires or is free from material desires, one should in all respects worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the reason for that also is explained right in that first sentence. Because all activities, all knowledge, all remembrance, even forgetfulness is being initiated by Paramatma within our heart. And we actually think about it, how Krishna is actually everything, even in this material world. I mean, I might have even said this in one of the few Bhagavad Gita's classes I've given before, but it's always been kind of inconceivable to me how, you know, people actually can drive their cars and motor scooters all over the streets in India and not have, like, you know, 200 accidents every hour. It's just like the way people drive and the typical like mentality, and it's actually given me more faith also, and kind of confirms this sentence that there must be a super soul in everyone's heart guiding everyone's activities. And so depending on our surrender to Him, then we'll be getting a particular type of a remembrance that will can lead us very quickly to make very swift advancement in devotional service. Or, as Srila Prabhupada states elsewhere, it may not happen even after many, many lifetimes of practice, because you know, acceptance of Krishna as everything, it takes a very, very high degree of surrender. And Krishna is so kind to us that He allows us, He doesn't force us, but He allows us to serve Him how we want to serve Him. He allows us to surrender to Him or not surrender to Him in whatever particular way that we want, and He reciprocates with us perfectly in relation with that, no matter how we do actually surrender to Him. Krishna is always with us, and He's also incarnated, as mentioned here, in the Vedas. And this is also very important, because when we hear Srila Prabhupada preach, he's always referring to the Vedas. Every single philosophical point he makes, he goes back and refers to something in the Shruti or in the Smriti. And so this is very instructive also. And we have this wonderful process of checks and balances. This way we can always know if what we're doing, if we're on the right path. And being on the right path is a very, very important thing, because sometimes, many times in fact, we think we're actually on the right path, and only actually after many, many years of practice do we realize that we were actually, I'm talking about myself particularly, was I actually cultivating my anarthas, which are very, very subtle. And the more we develop love for Krishna, the more Krishna kindly reveals to us what our blockages are to our advancement in Krishna consciousness. And so by this process of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, we have the Shastra, we have the Vedas, which are actually produced from the breathing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in so many different forms. And of course, as devotees were more specifically interested in those specific Shastras that give instructions and in so many different forms from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And also the spiritual master who's coming in the disciplic succession, and then also the sadhus. So through this process of checks and balances, we can always make sure that we are on the right path. Because as I said, the more we advance in Krishna consciousness, the more we feel Krishna's presence within our heart, the more Krishna kindly wants to urge us further and further along, but he also wants to show us the things that are holding us back from advancing in Krishna consciousness. And these things are very insidious, they're very difficult to recognize many times, but it's much more easy in the association with devotees. Krishna makes some things apparent that might not be apparent in just if we were associating with our own mind and our own false ego and materialistic type of people. So there's so many great benefits we have in devotional service, and we just have to adopt the technology which is given to us in so many of the different books from the Goswamis and from Srila Prabhupada, and understand through that the mood of the pure devotee. This is actually really, really important to understand. And there was one or two questions brought up yesterday, and Maharaj really nicely answered them also. He was talking about Purushottama Mas and how devotees are doing different austerities. And in fact, in the 24-hour Kirtan party, a few different devotees are doing different austerities. And so one devotee was having a problem in Kirtan. He was just not very enthusiastic, and some of the devotees were complaining on a few different shifts that he was, not really enthusiastic. He's a new devotee. He's been on the party only a couple months, and they would try to encourage him, and he'd get a little bit, angry with them. And so I approached him, and I said, what's going on? You need to be more enthusiastic in Kirtan. It looks like you're just kind of, staying within your mind. Kirtan, of course, is a great, incredibly great opportunity. I remember one of the twins, I think it was Pangajangari Prabhu, gave talk class up in Mayapur, and saying his realization how Kirtan is so much more powerful than any other process of Krishna consciousness, because it engages all our senses, and when we chant very loudly, we're able to get beyond all the chatter of the mind. And so it's a always a really good opportunity, I find, to be when we're in Kirtan, to try to really chant enthusiastically, and it really helps for me to, get beyond the mind. So, I approached him and I said, Prabhu, it's really going to help you a lot if you're much more enthusiastic in Kirtan. So I was inquiring from him, and then it turns out that he's doing a late night shift. He's doing 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. in the evening. Then he's also doing 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning shift. And after that, he sleeps a couple hours. Then he goes on parikrama, and he's doing parikrama every day also. And so he said, yeah, I'm getting like 2 or 3 hours of sleep a day. And so I told him, I said, Prabhu, your service is chanting. That's the service that you've been given. And, the service that we've been given in Krishna consciousness is really, really important. And it kind of helped me realize during class yesterday also, Maharaj was saying how, the service we're given, the instruction we're given us by the spiritual master is the most important thing in our life. And sometime we think, and of course austerity in Krishna consciousness is always good. And I'm not saying Vrindavan parikrama isn't good. It's incredibly powerful and purifying and everything. But it's important that we see things in relation with our service that we've been given us in Krishna consciousness, because that service has a direct relationship with our spiritual master. And when we actually carry the attitude and the mood of austerity and detachment within that service, then that becomes very pleasing to our spiritual master, and we can make very fast spiritual advancement. And so someone asked the question yesterday also why Prabhupada didn't observe Purushottama Mas and all these Chaturmas, things like that. Because Prabhupada knew that the process of devotional service itself, although it may seem very simple, this is part of our disease, especially as Westerners, is that we always think we have to kind of add something to the process because maybe it's not totally complete in and of itself. And so sometimes it may be, I'm not saying necessarily, but it may be that, our desire to perform all these different kind of austerities may prove to be somewhat of a distraction. And if it takes us away from our main service in Krishna consciousness, it may actually interfere with it. And also one could, start becoming a little falsely proud that he's doing these, austerities that someone else isn't doing like that, because false pride also is very subtle and very insidious. And Srila Prabhupada states that unless one becomes free from false pride, one cannot completely surrender to Krishna. So I think we'll stop here if anyone has any questions or comments. Is anyone here for the first time? Yes. Okay.
I appreciate your story about this devotee with lots of enthusiasm, simply because he wasn't getting enough rest. Basic thing. So, myself being physically completely impaired, I always make sure that if I have a rod, it's something that I can do without cutting into the rest of the things which I have to do. Because I'm not 20 years old anymore, and I only have enough strength and focusing power to do what I have to do. Besides adding all kinds of things, real simple. I can't do parikrama. I haven't been able to walk very well for years. So I have a ride down to Vrindavan. I do my Govardhan Park from there. And I read the 15th chapter, which takes 5 to 10 minutes with the translations. And that's a lot to extra. But I'm completely aware that I should try to chant more rounds. I haven't fixed how many extra rounds. But it is to try to chant extra rounds. Who's counting? To chant extra rounds. And to try to read. And in the process of going down to my Govardhan Park and Vrindavan, there's so many great saintly persons who have samadhis there, and I'm able to make prayers, take benedictions, to request benedictions from some of these personalities. So this is something which is very great. I have one question. It's not exactly on the verse, but you brought it up. What is the significance of that banyan tree? I mean, the point is made that the roots are upward and the branches are down. What's the actual significance of that?
The significance is that
later it says that the roots are the fruit of activities of the human society. Roots are up, branches are down. I mean, I don't understand the up and the down part.
well, this material world, although it looks like reality to us, it's a reflection of reality. So it's kind of like an upside down tree. And although to us it looks like we're seeing things through our external senses, we're perceiving things in like a real form, actually it's upside down. And Srila Prabhupada explains that one can see in the reflection of a pool, reflection of a tree upside down. And so he's explaining how, Krishna's explaining how this upside down tree is actually like a tree. Everything begins from the roots. So this tree is upside down and because things start from the creation of Lord Brahma. Therefore it's considered the roots are beginning from Brahma Loka. And then all the different unlimited varieties of the actions and interactions of human society are all coming down as the branches, twigs, and leaves down from the original source of Brahma Loka.
Ramendra Swarup gave a nice diagram, kind of like an X, the spiritual world and the material world coming up like that as a reflection.
Ravindra Swarup or Sariputta?
Ravindra Swarup.
Oh.
It was a long time ago I made this diagram. So, just to illustrate, that's how he perceived the material world as a reflection, because it was just like an X. So that below is the spiritual world, and the upper part was the reflection, which was exactly the opposite of his reflection. So I was just wondering, because when you look at a banyan tree, there's roots going everywhere.
Yeah.
Branches are going everywhere. And to get out, to understand where the source is, you can't understand because there's so many trunks. If you've got a good, well-established banyan tree, there's so many trunks. When I was in Nairobi, there's this very famous park, Uhuru Park. I don't know, I think that tree is like a mile in diameter. And you couldn't possibly understand where it began. So,
it started with one little seed. Huh?
One little seed,
yeah. Yeah, those first two verses are I mean, I think it's significant about those verses when Krishna says that the banyan tree of this material world is situated on desire. And that is really interesting because it immediately brings...
And fed by the material homes.
It brings into, our awareness that it's our desire that is the cause of us being in this material world. And therefore, it's our responsibility that we've somehow or other gotten here. Anything else? Any other questions? Jai Hare Krishna, Bhagavad Gita ki Jai.